This is Dr. Jerome Corsi and with the truthcentral.com, and we have a very special guest today. I'm really delighted to have Tony Shaffer join us. Tony, how are you today?
Jerry, I'm doing very well. Thank you. It's always a pleasure and actually a treat because I enjoy our conversations to be on with you. So thanks for having me.
And let's get your affiliations out there so people know what the websites are.
Yeah, so I currently am the president of two organizations which are working together. One is the London Center for Policy Research, named after you, as you know, after our dear friend, Dr. Herb London. Herb set up the center in Manhattan, still there. We're working to maintain that as part of his legacy. Does a range of things from environmental issues, which we'll be talking about today, as well as national security, from the soup to nuts, from diplomatic to military, everything in between, constitutional governance, all these things. And by the way, Herb was a nonpartisan. I consider London Center completely nonpartisan. As a matter of fact, most people in New York do still consider London Center nonpartisan because he's got friends I deal with from both sides of the political aisle to this day. And then the other organizations, Project Sentinel, projectsentinel.com, focused primarily on working to return governance, the full spectrum of U.S. governance to the principles of the founding fathers. And so those are the two things that I'm currently running. And you're part of all of that because obviously your ideas are fundamental to the success of both organizations. So I always appreciate being on with you.
Well, it's always my pleasure. And I greatly appreciate your intelligence background and all that you've done. And I do miss Herb London greatly. He was a friend, and I admired him tremendously. Let's get right into the discussion.
Sure.
I've been watching very carefully, as I'm sure you have, this NATO dance with Ukraine as to whether or not, Ukraine, President Biden is saying, well, Ukraine's going to be in NATO. And then you look at this offer that NATO gave, and there's all these conditions, which seems to me to be that NATO is really hesitating. What's your take on that, Tony?
So I studied the prelude and the actual events of, and then the aftermath, as you have. And it's interesting that they gave so much hope. And obviously hope is not a strategy, as we've learned, but they gave so much hope to Zelenskyy. And that this conference, that Vilnius, was going to be the big turning point for Ukraine to become a true member of NATO. And I almost feel sorry for Zelenskyy showing up and being told, well, I know we said this, but we really didn't mean it. And that was very apparent by both his conduct at the conference, which I find hilarious. By the way, do you think that maybe he and Dr. Fauci, being of the same height, could get together and maybe do a circus sideshow or something? I mean, to me, they make a lot of money off that. I'm just saying. Get a bearded lady, and man, they'd corner the market. But I do feel sorry for the guy because he literally got the old bait and switch. And there are outliers who are playing the long game, like Erdogan, the president of Turkey. Man, that guy cleaned up. He's the guy who basically is in the driver's seat right now more than anyone else, because he basically is playing the fence effectively. He's got, Russia on one hand, where he's dealing with Vladimir Putin. He's dealing with us. He basically finally is going to get the latest block F-16s, which are still a good weapon, not the best, but one of the good ones, as one of the concessions for allowing Sweden to join finally. So I really saw this as Erdogan's real moment to shine, because he was playing both sides and he cleaned up. With that said, NATO itself as an organization is showing a great weakness because, as I just mentioned, Erdogan's playing both sides. I don't think he's a dependable member of NATO. I've never thought he was, since he was actually allowing ISIS to grow rapidly during 2014, 2015, 2016, 2017, when they left the back door open for people and resources to travel into Iraq, to become part of the Islamic State, and he played his own game, and and thousands died, to include Assyrian Christians, which I don't think we should ever forget about how he played that and did that. So I don't trust him, and I think that very fact shows that NATO is not a strong organization. Erdogan's always going to play Erdogan's game, and that's why I think that fundamentally, even with the entry of Finland, by the way, Finland is a traditional not only client of Russia, it at one point in time was part of Russia during the Tsarist time. So that has got to be something that's going to concern Putin. I don't think it's going to go over well. And then also Sweden. Sweden has already been an integrated, interlocked member of NATO, just de facto. They have amazing weapons. They've worked with us during the Cold War. They were an amazing, quiet ally, even though they were technically neutral. So all these things that supposedly are benefits, I don't see as benefits. It's like, yeah, okay, this looks great on paper, perhaps, maybe. I don't think so. I think it just kind of denotes that there's a desperation afoot with NATO trying to push so hard to show this unity. It's almost like they're trying too hard, Jerry. It's like, really? And so I just don't buy it. I don't think anybody else buys it. And I think all they're doing is pushing us into a greater potential clash with Putin at this point.
Well, I'm even wondering, NATO is a post-World War II organization to contain the Soviet Union, and I'm wondering if NATO has served its purpose. I mean, it's clear that the NATO countries are concerned that admitting Ukraine to NATO would effectively mean that NATO's at war with Russia because of a treaty commitment,
right?
Which is the foundation of NATO, is that if one country is attacked, all countries are attacked.
Right.
And I don't think the NATO countries want to be at war with Russia in the open. But yet we're having a proxy war through, it's kind of like a wink, wink that we did in the Korean War, that we did in the Vietnam War. We're again having a proxy war. So I wonder if NATO has served its purpose.
I think, well, it has. Look back at the Budapest Agreement, '94, where essentially Ukraine was formed. The basic agreements in that agreement, that's redundant, sorry, but the basic agreement was for Ukraine to give up its nuclear weapons to Russia. That is to say, since Ukraine was part of the Soviet Union, they were essentially the center for a number of activities for the USSR, for the Soviet Union. People tend to forget, but we've been reminded lately, Chernobyl actually happened in Ukraine, not Russia. And that was a big part of the Soviet story of failure during that time. So during that time, during the early 90s, peace dividend, all this other nonsense that was coming out of the Clinton administration, that's a Freudian slip, that one of the agreements was, if Ukraine gives up its nuclear weapons, we, the United States, Great Britain, a couple other countries, would be guarantors of Ukraine's territorial integrity. And I get that. That's the reason we're doing the support to Ukraine. But the other part of that, which is what Putin has been saying has been violated, and he's correct. I'm not a pro-Putin guy, but he's correct. The agreement was NATO wouldn't move east, that NATO would not become essentially expansionist. And it did, big time, and still did. As a matter of fact, Vilnius, having the conference in Vilnius, was another poke in the eye to Putin, because obviously Vilnius was one of those states that NATO said they would never absorb into NATO, and they did. So everything that has happened, both sides have to understand there's reasons for each feeling they've been antagonized. NATO feels that they're being put upon because of the invasion of Ukraine. It clearly violates this agreement. Same time, Putin's been saying, you guys are moving east. You told me you wouldn't. You did. And I'm drawing the line. And I do believe, by the way, Jerry, that Putin has drawn the line, that he's not going to take any more expansionism of NATO. You start talking about moving into any other nations, I think you truly are risking nuclear war, because Putin recognizes that the Russian Republic, whatever you want to call it, that which is Russia, has been invaded multiple times by a multitude of enemies. So they have a history and memory of this. This is like anything else in a long-term political construct. The Russians do not like the idea of having foreign invaders potentially moving into their territory. It is what it is. We cannot project or explain away how they feel. They feel that way. We just have to accept it. And that's the other thing I fault the Biden folks for. They live in their own little bubble, and they project, they cajole, they create policy without any regard to the effects in the real world, which I find not only harmful, I find it treasonous to the point, in some point, because I think they're actually playing foreign policy for another side. We can talk about that a bit, but I think this whole thing with the Biden folks, they want this to weaken us. They want, as Biden said, to excuse to say, "Oh, we have nothing left. We've used all our ammo." I think they want that, and that's why they've done such a And think about this: they've just approved. They approved the NDAA, this new defense spending budget, $80 billion, and yet somehow I don't know if they're properly focusing on replenishing the weapons taken out of our wartime stocks, our forward deployed logistical stocks globally, to replenish all the ammunition been taken out. These are all things which, if I were in charge, if you were working, in the administration, Jerry, you and I would work. These are all common sense things that would be done immediately. But it seems to me these things are a bridge too far for the Biden folks to understand. And I think that there's a reason for that.
I think your point about Russia's traditional concern about invasion, people are not taught history any longer. In the period 1939, before Hitler invaded Russia, when the Stalin-Hitler pact was in place,
right?
The Soviet Union invaded both Finland and Ukraine. I mean, they moved in. Yeah. And the access to the Atlantic through Finland, the Baltic Sea, the Atlantic, access to the Atlantic from Sevastopol in Ukraine through the Black Sea into the Mediterranean Sea to the Atlantic. I mean, this is the only route Russia has to the Atlantic. And I don't think Russia's ready to abandon the ability to get into the Atlantic and also to have these buffer zones. And this is part of geopolitics,
right?
Spheres of influence and
that's right.
National interests of a major state, which has, it's like moving missiles into Cuba in 1962 with Russia did it. Immediately we had a reaction.
Right.
And so I don't think people really understand the geopolitical forces here, which transcend current politics, because these are long-term Russian objectives, which go back hundreds of years. I mean, would you agree with that?
I do. And I think that's to your point, Jerry. People in the current administration have not studied history or ignoring it. Jake Sullivan, for example. Jake Sullivan should not be the national security advisor. His best future would be essentially, I think, running an IKEA somewhere. At least he could get like the foreign flavor of business. And by the way, did you ever notice that his face, he always looks like his mom just walked into him naked with the Hustler magazine in the bathroom. I swear to God, it's like really? But that mentality, that teenage mentality, carries over to his attitude of national security. I mean, if you ever watch him, just the way he presents information, it's arrogance. It's arrogance bordering on insanity. I mean, when you got him, Victoria Nuland, yeah, there he is. That's that. Oh my God, I got a Hustler in my hand, and my mom walked in face. Like, really? So, I mean, it's a combination of that and the character Beaker from the Muppets. I mean, I don't know how that guy gets up in the morning and actually does anything useful. As a matter of fact, I don't think he does. So that's my point, Jerry. And to underscore your point, they purposely ignore history. They purposely ignore both the lessons of history. I don't believe history necessarily repeats, but it takes samples and replays them, much like a bad rapper. It's going to take a good song and kind of replay it. And that's what we see here. We see in this case, the Biden folks working, I think, to be antagonistic because that's what they want. They want the antagonism because it creates chaos, the chaos which they then can take advantage of politically. That it's all linked. And again, I don't think that Sullivan is a stupid guy. I think he's an arrogant guy. I think he's got, like the Bidens, a completely warped sense of purpose based on political belief rather than the necessity of maintaining their oath to the United States and the Constitution. That's so their interests are not the U.S. interests, Jerry, and it shows basically by ignoring history, by pretending not to know everything you and I just spoke about, and moving forward in a way that's guaranteed to create chaos and havoc.
Let's switch topics. I
Sure.
have also been following very closely this XRP case. The XRP is, of course, a cryptocurrency. It's really not exactly a cryptocurrency. It's really a system for utilizing international payments.
Right.
And it was interesting to see the SEC decision come out, which essentially said that XRP is not a digital, it's not a security. And even institutions where it is a security, they have to buy their XRP on public exchanges. This was very favorable to XRP. And it was at the same time that this Fed Now program is going to be introduced by the Federal Reserve late in July. And it looks like to me that the Federal Reserve, the timing is never accidental. So I think the Federal Reserve looks like a Trump, to use a phrase, the SEC, and said, look, we want XRP, you guys back down. And this is the beginning of a move toward a global central bank digital currency, which will be linked internationally, will be into a global system where everybody's money, every transaction you do in a bank can be tracked, programmed. All your money will be digital. I mean, this should be a very frightening development for people. And I don't think people are aware of it even going on. What are your thoughts about this, Tony?
So 3 things. First, this is oriented towards the Chinese social credit system. That's what they want. They want some tool, Jerry. This is the technology. What you described is the technology that governments, not just ours, I think other governments are going to jump into this because we still are the largest financial center on the planet, that is the United States. So they're going to follow us. And this is where there's going to be competition eventually with China, because China has their own system and they're going to use their system for their purposes. And this is going to be the system for everybody else. And the ultimate objective is to make sure that you and I cannot do anything fundamentally different than what the government wants us to do. That's where this is all going. It's very Orwellian. And I don't think people fully understand. Secondly, they've been promulgating this and trying to justify this action by things like SBF, Sam Bankman-Fried, and FTX. That whole FTX thing, I think, Jerry, was a setup. I think when Sam Bankman-Fried was working with the Democrats, was actually working with the FEC guy, who now had to resign, was meant to create a overload condition that created, again, a crisis that someone had to solve, And Sam Bankman-Fried was successful based on his parents being Democrat operatives, working with the folks at the SEC, creating a massive loss of money. This digitization, requiring oversight, requiring someone to come in. Same thing we're talking about in Ukraine, just done in the financial system. So I think in this case, if anybody, I recommend people go back and look at Sam Bankman-Fried. I think you need to go back and look at the players. It would be too long. I mean, that would be a whole separate show to Jerry for us to get into that, which I wouldn't mind doing at some point if you'd like. But the SBF FTX issue, I think, is the exemplar, which was the FTX issue is the Ukraine war for the financial networks. It's like, hey, this is a crisis. We need to jump in and fix it. Ooh, scary. And I think that's what has been created here. So that's the second point. Third, most importantly, they need to detach real assets from digital currency, so there can be no requirement for them to actually fulfill any request, need for you to get something back. They want you to have nothing and be happy, literally. And the whole idea of a digital currency that's tied to nothing is nothing. It basically gives you no power. It's all about them having all the 100% power. Think about that. Right now, and when I heard about some of this stuff, I ordered some more silver. It's like, okay, I'm getting more silver just in case. I ordered some yesterday. It's like, okay, just I have stuff that are hard assets. Not as much as I'd like, but a few things. And the idea here is that, yeah, our currency is tied to something. And, in the case of the United States, it's tied to kind of the fiat that is the United States, the fiat dollar, the petrodollar. But it's still, you get dollar bills, you have them, you can stack them up. The U.S. government sends planes of C-130s full of them to bad guys to pay them off. So it's still a hard asset, for better or for worse. And they want to basically remove that so that everything you do is virtual. And the moment they have that, they have control of you. It is what it is. And that's why they want us, Jerry, on electric cars, on the grid, so they can apportion power to their desire. They want to have you on digital currency. So if you misbehave and don't stand up, basically they report you to the authorities for disrespecting, your mom. Anything that they can do, it becomes something the government holds over you. And this is the ultimate execution of Marxism. And I don't know how people don't understand that.
They can switch you off. I mean, if you show up one morning, look at your bank account, it's gone. Right. What do you do? I mean, and
there's no recourse. Yeah.
There's no recourse.
It's their currency. Well, we didn't like what you were doing. You signed an agreement.
Exactly. And we know where everything is. And they're also talking about this universal ledger where you'd even have your property deeds electronic, and they'd be all. So eventually they know everything about you and could unplug any part of it anytime they decide that you're no longer desirable.
Right.
And again, I don't think
happening in China now. Happening in China. Look at what they do with the social credit system there. If you need an example, just look at that.
Let's cover one more topic.
Sure.
We are hearing now, of course, because it's a hot summer, and we've got El Nino coming. El Nino is now coming up, reversing direction in the Pacific Ocean currents. So the currents are now moving in a direction from the Pacific and from China, etc., toward the United States, and that causes a warmer U.S. And these are forces beyond human control, but yet the warmer summer is every media you look at. Global warming is causing it hotter than ever on Earth, which is, I want your take on this, but it seems to me to be absolutely ideological nonsense. And you have the degrees in climate science, so I'd be very interested in hearing what you think about this.
So, speaking as an actual credentialed expert, it's hogwash. And let's break this down. First, John Kerry. I love John Kerry. Old Boltneck. I mean, if there was ever someone who picked up the mantle of Herman Munster and Frankenstein, it's him. I mean, if you just look at him and it's amazing.
My favorite Swift boat guy, by the way.
Yeah, I know you did a great job on it, by the way. Yeah. Thank goodness. So John Kerry is the ultimate snake oil salesman. And let me break this down on a personal note. There he is. You can't see the bolts because they put like a makeup thing on it, but they're there. They're the makeup. They're there. Trust me on that. And to quote Biden, "Come on, man, they're there." So he epitomizes grifter because recently his wife, Miss Hines, sold off their business jet, and yet under oath he lied about it, saying, "Oh, we've never had a business jet," which promotes. They say pollute. Let me be clear on this. They say pollutes all these tons of CO2. That gives it off. It's like it's not a pollutant, but they were accused of being hypocrites, which they were. But speaking of hypocrites, let's take a step back just to what he was accused of doing. They were accused of using a business jet to put all sorts of CO2 into the atmosphere. And it's kind of like, I don't care because CO2 is not the enemy. Let's be very clear on this for the audience. CO2 is plant food. Jerry, do you know how many trees there are on planet Earth?
No, how many?
Seriously.
It's
3 trillion.
Right.
3 trillion. I just went around my yard the other day. I got about 100, so I'm pretty proud of that.
And we've reforested largely. And
so yeah, but think about that: 3 trillion, and each tree on a conservative day, according to the Audubon Society, takes in about 48 pounds. 48 pounds per year. So you multiply 3 trillion by 48. There's no doubt where the carbon's going. The carbon's going to tree food. It's not being absorbed into the ocean to the El Nino thing. It's like, no. Plants are growing. And the other thing they don't talk about, out of all these trees thriving, the planet has a potential to get greener. As a matter of fact, it has gotten greener. We came through little ice ages. We are now, 4,000 years into a net cooling. We are cooling down as a planet. There's been no net change in the 800,000 years. And they use that date. Old Boltnick uses that date because, as Tom Massey pointed out recently, and I texted with Tom on this, they only started 800,000 years ago, because before that, the whole planet was way higher in carbon, and we weren't there to cause it. And old Boltnick's, John Kerry's answer is, well, man wasn't there. It's different now. It's like, yeah, we want the CO2 because it creates more green conditions. What they don't also talk about, Jerry, is if they are successful, if they, the knuckleheads like old Boltnick, are successful in reducing carbon, if we fall below 0.03% of the atmosphere to 0.2, everything dies. We die. The carbon cycle ceases because there's not enough to basically help maintain those 3 trillion trees. So I'm just saying, for goodness sake, for those who really do want to save the planet, wake up. Greta Thunberg is not your friend. She's a little midget who apparently dropped out of high school with no degree, who's trying to basically convince you to do things to undermine the future of your own children. It's nonsense. So I'm sorry I get a little bit emotional about this because I'm just so tired of the nonsense, Jerry, but that's how big a set of malarkey this is.
So we could solve the entire global climate change, global warming crisis, which I think is non-existent, by planting more trees.
It is non-existent, and we'd have a greener, look, I'm a greenie. Look, I got a degree in environmental studies because I do actually care about the planet, and I was a conservative. And yeah, the answer is yes, plant more trees. You'll be happy for them. I love my trees. I was out smoking a cigar, watching my yard last night. I enjoy watching trees breathe in CO2. It's a great process. More people should do it.
Well, I do the same. And the point is, we are in, the Earth. These cycles take hundreds and thousands of years. Geologic time.
Absolutely.
You can't say this summer is, it isn't the hottest on record. 1936 was much hotter.
Right.
And, people don't have the ability to think in geologic time.
No.
The Earth is, let's say, 4.6 billion years old, which is probably one of the better estimates in terms of scientific analysis of the Earth's history. And for 80% of the time, nothing existed on the surface of the Earth. It's 20% of the Earth's history in which all this life has occurred. There have been 5 extinctions, mass extinctions of everything living surface of the Earth before human beings ever got here.
Right.
So this is not a stable place.
No, I mean, and we had something called the boring billion, where basically the planet was a dead planet for 1 billion years. That's a long time, Jerry. That's
a long time.
Longer than, I mean, so when you get these knuckleheads like John, we're about to lose. It's like, no, John Kerry is a knucklehead. He has no idea what he's talking about. He does not have a degree. Greta Thunberg does not have a degree. This is all junk. It's not even science. It's not even science because it's not based on science. If you actually use the science like Tom Massey did, or Scott Perry took him on as well, Congressman Perry. If you actually use the science, say, oh, well, this is not a serious conversation. No, it's not serious because you're not serious. You Mr. Kerry, are clearly out to undermine the actual science for purposes of converting it to a political battering ram they can use to drive these other things to get us to buy into this whole green energy thing. The other thing, let's talk about this for a second, Jerry. This is something I think people need to understand when they start talking about what they do. One of the things, do you know the type of minerals that go into a Prius, just off the top of your head? I know you're not a scientist. Do you know what they are?
No, why don't you go ahead and give it to us?
So it takes lithium, it takes carbon and huge amounts, and of course, how many windmills does it take to make the plastic in a Prius. Do you know what the number is?
No, how many?
0, because you can't make carbon. You can't make it out of windmills. I mean, it's like, are are these people are nuts? So, but more importantly, you have thousands of kids mining lithium, mining cobalt in Africa, literally kids in Central African Republic, the Congo, doing these dirty work for us, for the United States, to basically make sure that you have this virtue signal of virtue signals as a vehicle. And there's something else. People don't know this, but Priuses also require 2 rare earths that take a lot of digging, destroying the earth, in other words. Neodymium and lanthanum. These are used to allow hybrid batteries, electric motors to be more efficient. Each Prius uses 2.2 pounds of lithium and 20 to 30 pounds of lanthanum. So, Jerry, these are rare earths. So to virtue signal, you've got to go and find all these rare earths to put into this vehicle, which is a virtue signal. It doesn't do anything to help the environment. And yet somehow, if we challenge them by the facts, if I lay this out, you're anti-green. You don't want to save the planet. No, I actually do want to save the planet, and I want to do it in such a way that we can make it greener. We actually don't have to use child labor in African mines to actually create something that should not exist, because it makes no sense. It doesn't benefit anybody except those who sell it. China gets benefit because a lot of the process and products are processed there and returned here. None of this makes any sense. It is not scientific. It is dangerous to the people who are engaged in the process of manufacturing, and more importantly, engaged to the very fabric of society, because it doesn't do anything to help mankind.
Right, and these vehicles now today are also, on the internet. They can be monitored, and so
right.
you go out. They don't like you. They can turn off your bank account. They can turn off your electric vehicle.
Exactly.
You can't go anywhere.
It's all related. It's all related. Everything we're talking about here is all related. Create chaos, malfeasance, and the idea of having the state come in and tell you what's good or bad, and that's what they're trying to do here, Jerry. I mean, again, let's just break it down for the audience. First, we started with Ukraine. We've been lied to about that. People are constantly being deceptive, not trying to actually do the right thing. If you want to have Ukraine win, what they're doing is not helping Ukraine win. Victoria Nuland, I think, should be remembered as the Vladimir Dracula who sucked out the life out of Ukraine, because that's what she's done. But the Ukraine lies linked to this larger international effort to basically do certain things with climate, with banking. All these banking and climate things are all related. They are not detached. They do not function separately. And at the top, you have certain folks who are monitoring all this, Soros and others, who understand exactly what they're doing, and they're funding the very series of things that we were talking about that are going to essentially lose our ability to be a free people, not only the United States but the entire globe. So,
and creating crises in order to
absolutely
architect situations in which our behavior, a pandemic, so everything locks down.
Yep.
We then have, I think the next one will be a global, massive international economic downturn. So the middle class gets squeezed, maybe wiped out, forced into electric currency, to have the central bank digital currency come in. Each one of these crises has a kind of new world order solution to it.
Right.
We had first the pharmaceutical companies get a huge payday. Now the arms manufacturers are getting a huge payday. They're setting it up so the largest international banks will get a huge payday. I mean, these are moving things towards a globalism, which is totalitarian in nature. And people, I think, are just being led in like sheep from crisis after crisis. Never let a crisis go to waste. Which is Rahm Emanuel's great statement. And I think the globalists understand this and are architecting a future where we're being led along without realizing, without waking up and understanding how we're being architected into slavery.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And Jerry, that's the thing. It's like I signed aboard a long time ago when I was in 1981. I enlisted in the military the first time, took the oath of office. And a lot of us saw that bright shining city that Ronald Reagan talked about, and I still do. I still think that we are the beacon. Many of the things, we're not perfect as a nation. We're not perfect as a culture. We make mistakes. But we have established, for better or for worse, the best republic, the best governance I think the planet's ever seen, probably never ever will if we lose it. And what we created gave people the ability to be exceptional Americans. American exceptionalism is not about us being better than the world. The fact is the world can come here and be American. Those who have great ideas, those who have great desires can come here and be all they can be, to quote the Army. And I think that's the thing that makes us different as a nation. You can be American. You don't have to be here to be American. You can come here and be American. Now, I think you got to do it in a regulated way. You shouldn't be just coming across the border and live off the public dole. But my point is that we are the beacon of freedom. And everybody out there, from Soros on across to the other folks who are trying to make us a global system, want to snuff out the light of freedom. And that's what this is all about. It's a war against good and evil.
Well, I think that's a good summation, and thank you. This is thetruthcentral.com, and we're here with Tony Shaffer. Tony, why don't you give your websites out so people know how to follow you and reach you?
Sure. LondonCenter.org, London Center for Policy Research. As I mentioned, we are a Manhattan-based think tank based on the philosophies and beliefs of Dr. Herb London, an amazing man who was nonpartisan, who allowed us to do a great job. And of course, Project Sentinel, projectsentinel.com, which we work to bring back constitutional and concepts to governance based on the founding fathers. So, Jerry, it's been great having the time with you on your show. I appreciate being here. Thanks for having me.
It's been really great as well. I'm sure our audience is going to appreciate it, and we'll have you back, Tony.
Thank you.
Thank you all for joining us. This is Dr. Jerome Corsi, thetruthcentral.com. In the end, God always wins. God will win here too. Thank you for joining us. God bless.